Hi, I'm Don with Moto here today to give you a little demonstration and explanation on one of their product lines. This is the Moto blind bearing puller tool. Okay, as you can see, it's a pretty intricate and very complete kit. It's got everything you need to pull most any bearing up to about a 32 to 34 millimeter size. It also gives you a couple of different options for bearing removal, which one would be a slide hammer type, and the other would be a pull type, where you're actually attaching to the bearing and it's going to remove the bearing through a series of threaded rods here. We've got a couple of different training aids to help demonstrate these products today. The tool itself is marketed as a blind bearing puller tool. In all reality, this is a really nice setup because it can be used to pull any bearing, okay? Let me give you a little explanation about what a blind bearing is. I've got this nasty, crusty old motorcycle engine case here, and as you can see, in the transmission side of that motor, we've got a bearing. This ball bearing is called a blind bearing because we can only see it and access it from one side. If we look at the external part of the engine case, you cannot see that bearing. So, in a lot of cases, what this requires is a tool that can remove that bearing, get a hold of it, attach to it, and pull it without damaging the engine case. Like I had said, it's also an all-around great tool for pulling any type of bearing. We also have a motorcycle wheel here. Wheel bearings are a common failure. They wear out, so they need to be replaced. This tool is perfectly capable of removing just about any bearing out of any wheel, engine. So it's a multitasker, which to me is just fabulous. Anytime I can find a tool that's going to do more than one thing, it's just a great thing. Tools are expensive, so any way we can save a little is great. This is a high quality set, and what we're going to do for you today is just give you a little demonstration of how to remove a bearing safely from a wheel and from an engine. A lot of people are working on a lot of older motorcycles these days. Parts to repair these motorcycles can sometimes be hard to attain. The older these bikes get, the less production there is on the parts. So it's imperative to have the proper tools to do these jobs. If you don't have the proper tool, you can wind up doing more bad than good. So let's start with the wheel. We'll do a basic measurement. We need to measure the inside diameter of this wheel bearing. And we're going to do that with a vernier caliper. Very simple, basic tool. Doesn't have to be fancy or digital or metric or anything like that. And we're just going to take the back side of that caliper and measure the inside of that bearing. Give it a little wiggle. We're not too critical here. We just want a general idea of where that measurement falls. And it looks we're right about 20 millimeters, okay? So we're going to come over to our bearing kit. We're going to search out a 20 or the closest thing there is to that, and it looks like, let's see here, and there's a 20, okay? The way these work, we have all these different sizes to adapt to the bearing. And if you notice, on the top is a very small lip, just a small edge, okay? What that's going to do is go down inside the bearing, and it's going to catch on the inside of that bearing, and then we have a choice of ways to remove that bearing from the wheel or engine case, whatever it might be. So we insert this part into the bearing, and then when we screw in our back side here, what it does is it spreads those rings out a little bit to get a good firm grip on that bearing, okay? It's all very high quality carbon steel. So what we're going to do is just take that first piece. As you can see, it's not going to go in just all that easy. It's flexible. We're going to give it a little push and get it down inside that bearing. Now, as you can see, it's kind of loose, just wiggling around. That's where this comes in. Your backside push rod here is going to screw into that, and you can feel it snugging up. And we just want it, snug. We don't have to go gorilla tight on this stuff. And since a lot of times we're using multiple sizes. I don't have a problem with using an adjustable wrench on these because we're changing up back and forth. No need to have 20 wrenches out here. So what we're going to do is just get a wrench on this, on the base, and give it a little snug up here. Just snug. And as you can see, now it's pretty tight. Okay. Next, we're going to go to our slide hammer. And a lot of people get a little nervous about this kind of stuff because it seems fairly violent, but the way it's operating here, the way it's removing the bearing, it's really one of the best, easiest, and safest ways to do this. So we're going to insert our slide hammer down in here. One key here is to make sure it screws all the way in. Okay, we don't want it slopping around. Once we're snug, we're going to be careful. We don't want to smash our fingers. We're going to use the grip. Got a nice knurled grip on here. Try to get a good hold on the wheel, and then we can go ahead and remove that bearing. And there it is. Once we've got the bearing removed, we can take off our slide hammer. And then we got to put our wrench back on here to loosen this back up. Pretty straightforward. And what that's done is it's released the pressure on the bearing. So now we can remove the tool from the bearing. And there you go. Wheel bearings are a common failure on motorcycles. Without this tool, it can be quite awkward to try and remove these. Most motorcycle wheel hubs where the bearings are installed are aluminum and are easily damaged, and bearings are, for the most part, a hardened steel. So if you start banging or beating on this thing the wrong way, the first thing you're going to do is damage that hub before the bearing. In this particular case, this hub is one piece with this wheel. Very expensive piece. So there's our wheel bearing removal with the slide hammer. Another way to remove these bearings, and we'll just simulate by setting this back in here. Let's give it a little. The second part of this kit is a pull tool. Instead of using a slide hammer, what you're doing here is we're inserting the same way. And then instead of using the push rod, we have a push rod built onto this puller here. So, and we need a good base for this to work correctly. This is not the ideal tool for the wheel. The slide hammer works much better, but just to demonstrate here, this would go down and these two bars are pressed against here. Screw the push rod as part of the plate, and then from the top, we're turning down and it will essentially pull the bearing out. So it's just a leverage type thing, okay? Very nice tool, very versatile. Can be used for all kinds of applications. We'll leave that for now. Second application here, we have an engine case. A very old, nasty motorcycle engine case. I purposely grabbed one in this condition to show you that no matter how bad this could get, this tool is still perfectly capable of removing these bearings. This is truly a blind-sided bearing. We cannot access this bearing from the other side, okay? So what we're going to do with this one, now this obviously isn't a customer's unit here. I would hope not, but if this were, we would have some wood, some type of a clamping system to the bench to try and keep everything secure. Once again, this is aluminum, very easily damaged. The bearings are steel, okay? So the bearing's not going to be damaged. If you start bouncing this thing around and don't handle it correctly, you're going to have some substantial damage. An older motorcycle, these engine cases could very well not be accessible any longer. Okay, the first thing we have to do is measure the inside diameter of this bearing we're going to remove. from this engine case. Once again, the back side of our veneer calipers. We'll go in here and take an inside diameter measurement. Doesn't have to be precise. This is kind of a universal setup here. So this particular bearing is showing about 17 millimeters inside diameter. So let's go over to our kit. We'll take a look. And there we go, 17 millimeter. Same thing, has a small lip. Now, because these are a little bit smaller than the previous bearings we pulled, we're going to change over to a different push rod. These work through the 10 to 17. Then the larger push rods like these are going to be from the 20 up to 30, 32 millimeter. So, get our rod inserted like so. That's the 10, we don't want that one. We want 17. Okay. So we're going to take our tool, insert that down, give it a push down into the bearing. Now you hear that click. That's actually the tool expanding to where it needs to be so it can grab a hold of that bearing. Our push rod, as you see, it's going to snug up in there and it's going to take the play out of all that. And once again, we'll put a wrench on it just to keep it kind of snug. Not gorilla tight. Don't have to be an animal with this stuff. We're not working on Mack trucks here. And then we're going to go to our slide hammer again. Insert our slide hammer. Bottomed out. Watch your fingers. Use your handle. Nice knurled handle. Now once again, if this was a customer's unit, we'd be a little bit different in the setup. We'd have some wood blocks, some clamps to the bench to keep anything from moving around too much. In this particular case, for demonstration purposes, we don't need to do that. So we're going to hold down our engine case and slide hammer our bearing out. Now you can see how crusty and nasty that is, and this tool has made really short work of it. So that's the Alpha Moto blind bearing removal tool. As far as a DIY guy goes or a professional, it gets top marks from us. Definitely a tool you should have in your box.